and welcome to another edition in the special series of the Check-In podcast, where we explore what it really means to lead well-being at work, at school, and at home. In this series, we're talking with leaders, educators, and community builders who are creating cultures of care, purpose, and connection. Today's guest is Mr. Paul Weston. Paul, thank you for joining us. Welcome to the podcast.
Pleasure. Nice to be here. Thanks for the invite.
Absolutely. Paul, tell our audience a little bit about yourself.
So as you probably gathered, I'm not from this part of the world. I'm English, which means I'm the guy on the podcast without the accent, because I'm the English guy speaking in the mother tongue. Yeah, my background is in the military. I joined the Royal Marines in the UK at the age of 16. As a musician, I was very passionate about music as a clarinet player, sax player, and a violin viola player. And I had a 26-year career traveling around the world making music. I went on to be an officer and did some stuff a little bit away from music as well. So I went to some very interesting and at times dangerous places around the world. Emigrated to Canada in 2005, where I keep my music. I still play semi-professionally, but my main focus now is on business growth. I started a consultancy. I worked in leadership development with a US company for many years and did my own leadership development programs and advising people in business setup, and got into sales as well, into a bit of entrepreneurship. So I do advise some companies on selling, and I'm a writer. I've had two published books, done extremely well. And I also am a partner with a custom clothing manufacturing company, Entropy. We do all the merchandise for the Maple Leafs and Raptors and so on. So that in a nutshell is what's got me to where I am today.
Oh, brilliant. So let me just dive right in with the first question, Paul, and that's, what does well-being at work mean to you personally?
Environment. What environment do we create for our staff? We talk about leadership often. It's a question I've been asked many, many times as a military leader. How do you function as a military leader? And the first thing is, as a leader, I would turn around and say, what is my commander's intent? What does my commander want me to achieve? And then the next thing is, what environment can I create in order to achieve that? And that has to continue to evolve into the well-being of the men and women under my command. And everybody's different, for so often in the military, we used to create an environment that one size fits all. And what I learned as I went through my career is one size doesn't fit all. Some people, they need to be put exactly where they need to be to do stuff. And other people, they need a metaphorical arm around the shoulder and understand and listen and communicate. So tied in with the well-being is the communication, the back and forth. Being able to listen, be an active listener to people is really important in creating that environment where somebody can come and talk to you. Possibly through a chain of command. I hear CEOs say, my door's always open. Not necessarily the right thing to do. I think there needs to be a structure in place and people need to talk to their immediate supervisor, but then evolve that through. So absolutely, environment is critical for the well-being and understanding the environment that some people need in the workplace.
Absolutely. Can you share one thing in your past or in your current profession?
Yeah. So I know a lot of companies I've worked with over the years, since I left the military, they think that recognition is a good example, and people want to be recognized for various things that they do, and they assume that everybody wants to be put on a pedestal under a spotlight. I remember in fact, going back to my military days, I ran a staff job for a couple of years in the Royal Marines headquarters. And then part of my staff was an accountant, a guy called Clive. And he was I don't want to put any accountants down, but he's kind of the grey guy in a grey office doing a grey job in a grey suit for 30 grey years. And at the end of the year, when I was there, I was his sort of boss. And 30 years, this guy had sat at the same desk in the same chair doing the same job. Well, let's recognize Clive. So at the Christmas party, we got him on stage with his wife. We gave him this nice plaque and his wife some flowers, and the blood drained from his face. And, he was a pretty grey guy anyway, but now he's white as a sheet. I said, "We'd like to say a few words." And he went, "No." And he got off the stage. Him and his wife got in a taxi and went home. And she was in tears. So I thought, oh, okay, I completely got that wrong. And the next day he came to see me. He said, "Can I talk about last night?" I said, "Yeah, sit down." He said, I don't want any of that. I do a job. I love my job. I've been doing it for 30 years. If I do something wrong, tell me. He said, "That's all I need. I don't need the spotlight and the pedestal." And I realized straight away that if you're going to recognize somebody, you have to understand how they want to be recognized. Yes, some people do want the spotlight and they do want the stage and the accolades. The next guy might want a good job. That's all they want. Good job. Thank you. Simple thing. So that's the classic example of how you create that well-being. Forgetting somebody who deserves to be recognized is not good, but recognizing people in the wrong way. And there's a great saying even about customer service: don't treat customers how you want to be treated, treat them how they want to be treated. Same goes for your staff. And I think that's a really good example of Clive. I really screwed that up, and I learned from that, hey, you've done a great job here. How should we recognize you? Do you want to employee of the month? No. And it's fine. I appreciate you thanking me. That's all it needs. Depends on the person.
No, I love that, Paul. I know in my past experience with managing people and leading people, at that time, 100% of the effort went into the people, making sure they had the things they needed to do the job. But one of the things that a lot of leaders don't do is focus on themselves. So how do you personally recharge or protect your own mental health while leading others?
I've always been a fit and active person. I played rugby for many years. I played cricket. I ran marathons. I had a bit of a hiatus when I left the military because I've been running around all the time in uniform. I had a few years where I didn't do very much, put a lot of weight on, and that really affected me. And then in 2010, I got back into doing some running. I ran a 10K, and then I got into CrossFit, and then I got into triathlon. And I think the links, I'm not a clinician. I can't talk from a professional perspective from that angle, but I know for me, if I don't go out and train, and what I love about being a triathlete is there's 3 disciplines: swimming, cycling, and running. So I want to be doing one of those pretty much every day, and that makes a huge difference to me. If I have kind of my dark hours early in the morning when I wake up. I think about, unless the day really excites me, I'm like, oh, geez, it's another day. What am I going to do today? If I get downstairs on my bike, get on the train, or I go out for not this time of year, but go out on the bike, or I go for a run on the trails near where I live, or I get down to the pool and swim, suddenly everything's different. I come back, I have breakfast, I'm ready to go. So for me, the relationship between physical health and mental health is absolutely vital. And that energizes me. And in fact, one of my books, some self-promotion here, Running in the Rain, is all about not making excuses for not doing something. And the title, Running in the Rain, talks about people who often say, oh, I didn't go for a run today because it was raining. And it's a really poor excuse, because let's face it, you're going to have a shower anyway. You're going to put your clothes in the laundry. What difference does it make if it's raining? And we used to have a saying in the military, there's no such thing as bad weather. There's poor equipment and bad preparation. So as long as you've got a rain jacket, get out there. I'll run it. -28 is my cutoff in the winter for running. And I actually feel better if I've gone out and run in foul weather than if I've gone out and run and it's a nice day. I've achieved more. That hot shower feels better if I've been running in the cold and the sleet and the snow or something like that. So the link between physical health and mental health, to me, is so intrinsically linked that is a vital component of keeping myself fit.
Yeah, absolutely. I remember a story that I heard with Tiger Woods when it was raining and this one particular tournament was going to get rained out, but the rain might be passing, so forth. Well, he went out and started practicing and hitting shots in the rain. And they asked him why. And he said, well, it's probably going to rain, so I need to practice in the elements.
Yeah. We used to have a saying in the military, if it's not raining, it's not training.
Huh. I bet there's a whole book full of military slogans and taglines, So what advice would you give to today's leaders who want to create that kind of culture of holistic health in the workplace?
Well, I think as a leader, like I said earlier, what is my intent? What is my commander's intent? So unless you're the very top of the organization, what does your boss want to achieve here? And I often see these sort of flow charts on LinkedIn. This is leadership, and there's 1,000 different slides and PowerPoint bits and arrows and flow charts. Oh, geez, we're making this really, really complicated. And a leader in business is there to get the job done. If you're being paid, if you're in the non-for-profit world, you have a duty to your stakeholders, to whoever gives your grants and donations and your end user. You have a duty to them. So it's getting the job done. That is fundamentally what a leader's about. Whether you're in charge of coaching a hockey team, you're there to win the tournament. And whether you're a CEO of a billion-dollar corporation, you're there for the shareholders. If you're a supervisor of 3 guys who work in a production unit, you're there to get the widgets, whatever it is, manufactured by Friday, so they get in the truck and get dispatched. So you've got a job to do. don't forget that. Leadership can be dressed up in many different ways. You're there to get the job done. And like I said earlier, how do you achieve that? Well, you have to create an environment. And I think motivation is a really interesting word. So motivation is, if you look in the Oxford English Dictionary, a willingness to act. And over the years, companies have used two traditional techniques. If you do this, I'll reward you with this. A bribe. They bribe people. Or if you don't do this, I will do this to you. So a threat. So motivation has taken two main forms, bribes or threats. Now, I'm not saying they don't work. They don't have a huge amount of great long-lasting value, because at some point you run out of bribes and threats, or people get fed up with it and go somewhere else. So the environment depends on the individual. What does the individual need in order to get the job done? Now, you might allocate a job to somebody in the workplace, and you know that person is going to get that job done, and you don't need to check in with them until it's completed, and they are going to meet the deadline and everything's great. Or somebody who's very ambitious will say, I'd love to take on this project. And you say, okay, so let's do a daily check-in. No, it's okay, boss. Leave me for 2 weeks to do this. And you know you can't, because you need to check in. Now, they might not realize they need that support mechanism. So that's where you're asking them questions. So what are you going to do if by tomorrow afternoon you've not got the report you need? Oh, yeah, I never thought about that. Okay, good. So let's get together at lunchtime tomorrow and see what I can do to help you get that report. So the support mechanism based on the individual needs of those people. That really is in order to function to get the job done. But there's another really interesting angle in leadership. And it comes down to a hockey analogy. And this is me, an English guy, talking about hockey, ice hockey, as we call it. And that is that not every person on the ice, or not every line on the ice, has a leader, as a captain or an assistant captain. There could be a line, 3 or 4, that doesn't have any A's or any C's. Now, somebody on that line has to kind of take the lead. And it's through their actions that become contagious that the rest of that line perform well. So you can have a leader in a business who joined the company last Friday, but through their actions, the job is done better. I define that as leadership. And I often say to CEOs, look, your managers are not necessarily your strongest leaders. You could have a guy who's been there working on that machine for 10 years, but the way he does things inspires other people to do things. I call that contagious leadership. And we can learn so much from those people. They're not in a definitive leadership position, as in they're in charge or responsible for other areas, but what they do inspires other people. Contagious leadership. I think that's an important part a lot of businesses miss out on.
I love that answer, Paul. And something that I recently came across is just the different paradoxes we have when it comes to mental health. And one of them that we have that comes to the table a lot is people's lack of motivation. And I myself have been guilty of using the phrase, if I was could just get myself motivated. Yeah. And the paradox is that in the doing actually generates the motivation to do it again.
Yeah.
Right. Because you get that win, you get that feeling of accomplishment when you're doing it. And then the motivation comes to do it again and again.
Yeah.
We've been always taught to be motivated, then comes action.
Yeah.
But really, action is first, and then it brings along everything else.
Yeah. There's a wonderful story about contagious leadership where rugby is kind of my passion, my sport. And there's a guy called Brendan Venter, who was a South African rugby player. He won the World Cup with South Africa in, I think it was 1995. And a couple of years later, he was coming towards the end of his career, but he got a professional contract with a club in the UK. I think it was Leicester. And, a team plays an away game. They go to the away changing room. They play the game. They come out. They get showered. They go into the bar. They have a meal. They have a chat. They get on the coach, their bus, and then they drive off back to their home. And as they were getting on the bus, Brendan Venter, this international superstar rugby player who'd come to play with his team, was like their professional player who'd come in to play with them for a couple of years. He wasn't on the bus. Nobody could find him. So they went back in the changing room. He was sweeping up the changing room. There's this superstar, the best player this club had ever got to play for them, was sweeping up the changing room. They said, what the hell are you doing? He said, this is what we do at my level. We leave the changing room cleaner than we found it. We want people to think how great we are. And from that point onwards, every time that club left an away game, they cleaned up the changing room. Contagious leadership. And that guy, you'd think of all the guys who should be cleaning it. Usually, if you do something like that, like the two youngest players are the ones who gather all the kit together and take it to the kit man to be washed and those sorts of things. He took that on. It's a classic example of a humbling experience by somebody.
Oh, that's a great story. And last question, Paul, to wrap this up. What gives you hope about the future of leadership and workplace well-being?
So on Sunday, I'm president of the Royal Marines Association of Ontario. It's Remembrance Sunday, and we are closely attached to Coburg, the town of Coburg, and St. Peter's Church is what we call our garrison church. We have a close affinity with the church, and the Reverend Matt McMillan there is our padre. And every Sunday, Remembrance Sunday, the Sunday before Remembrance Day, we parade. The local band there, the concert band, comes out. It's the only time they march up and down is for us. And we have some veterans out there. Most of the guys are in their 80s. I'm one of the youngest guys at 62 in the association. And we had a troop of air cadets came out. Very smart. There was a young air cadet warrant officer, probably about 15 years old, who got his men and women, boys and girls, into 3 lines and formed up and came to report to me, saluted. And they were very proud to be there. We had 2 guys, sentries, on the cenotaph with their heads down with the rifles. And it was -2. There was snow blowing across the ground. It was freezing cold winds. And those kids didn't moan, didn't complain once. And it was, that to me gives me so much faith for the future, because they're the future leaders. You know, they may not go on to an Ivy League university, and they may not get an MBA. They may not become CEOs of businesses, but I hope that, and I'm very confident that those young people will go to work for a business and they will believe in integrity, doing the right thing, and they'll be sweeping up the changing rooms, in a metaphorical phrase. And that will be contagious on the other people, because they've done it at uniform at the age of 12 to 16. And that I think gives me a lot of hope and faith for the future when I see those young people out there on a Sunday morning, freezing cold, showing some respect for people who served in the military over the years. So that's where I see the future, and it's I think it's bright. If you look at that, it's good, and hopefully they'll take that forward.
You know, I think, Paul, with all the different sports that, you know, parents can put their kids into and get that schedule or that calendar on the fridge super busy and super loaded. One thing that we did, and we weren't really aware of it until we learned of it, we had put our daughter in Air Cadets. She was about 13 at the time. She had her struggles, you know, with anxiety and so forth, like a lot of these kids do. And sports wasn't her thing. And I can honestly tell you and whoever's listening that Air Cadets, Air Cadets literally gave her such discipline and taught her so many good things. And she blossomed. She blossomed as a young teen from it. So, and it's so inexpensive, and it teaches so much. So a plug or a shout out to all the Air Cadets in each city. And Paul, before we go, I'd be remiss if hold up those books, sir. Show us those books. And so we have Running in
the Rain is basically a series of ideas of how to stop procrastinating, how to put things in place to get stuff done. And at the end of it, if you go out and run when it's raining, you feel good, you feel fantastic, you feel better than if it's just a typical sort of average day. Running Up Hills is my second book. This was published just over a year ago. They're both international bestsellers. And this is basically an irreverent journey through the ups and downs of life, some of the challenges that we face in our life, some of the things that have kind of annoyed me over the years. A word called faffing, which is a very English word of going around the outside and never actually getting stuff done, messing around and holding people up, and airports losing your bags, airlines losing your bags, and the frustrations of that. But at the end, it becomes a little bit more poignant. It talks about my mother's battle with Alzheimer's, what it's like to deal with a parent who goes through that terrible disease. And then it talks about my own journey with Tourette syndrome. Now, I grew up with Tourette's. I've had it my whole life, and there's been so many challenging times. But it's a neurodivergent issue, but it does affect your mental health because you go through hell. And I talk there about I was bullied at school by my teachers because they didn't understand that sort of journey. And it was tough going through the military at times, but it made me a stronger person. And I've got a lot of friends in the Tourette world, in the community, and we all believe that it's almost a hidden gift that we've been given to make us stronger. Because when you have to deal with that, it does make you stronger. Your character has to build. I'm very lucky. It's very mild in me now. I can go a long time without showing any sort of effects of it, but sometimes it does come out. You have no control over it. but it's a journey. So, yep, they've done very well, and everybody who's read them has said, yeah, they really helped with a lot of the stuff that I go through, and I recognize it as well. So, yeah, they're available, very, very reasonably priced on Amazon for the paperback, the hardback, and also the Kindle version's about $9, I think. So very easily priced for people to get hold of.
Awesome. And yeah, in concluding this conversation here, how far we've come in mental health and total well-being, from zero conversations to now, we're opening doors, we're opening windows. Like, that's my goal, is to open doors, open windows, open conversations at work, at school, at home. And I think if we do that, then the next generation has a lot better starting point than perhaps our generations did. So again, Paul, thank you so much for being a guest. Thoroughly enjoyed it. Wrote down a lot of notes. Some notes I missed, but I know with technology today that's all being recorded. So I'll definitely go back and take more notes down. So thanks again, Paul. Appreciate it.
My pleasure. Thanks, Nelson.